I saw the ad by accident, or at least I told myself that. A banner wedged between two posts on a forum I kept swearing I'd stop reading. The design was lazy, black background, white text, no logo, no animation, just a sentence: delete your past, real results, guaranteed. There was a price at the bottom like a joke. $299. I'm 33 and not special. I'm the kind of person who keeps USB cables in a drawer and says, I'll organize those tomorrow. I don't have a criminal record. I don't have a dramatic origin story. I've made the usual mistakes. Broken promises, dumb drunk texts, a thesis I didn't finish. There were a few emails I wish I'd never sent, a couple of photos I hated, some old accounts under usernames I don't like seeing anymore. I've got family, parents who retired 2 towns over, a sister who lives too far away and reminds me every holiday, a few cousins in a group chat that pings for birthdays, a 12-year-old dog named Iris who still lives with my parents because our building doesn't allow pets. So when I say I clicked the ad because it was dumb, that's true. I did it the way I read horoscopes or watched those videos where a guy power washes a driveway. Something soothing about neat solutions. Wipe the slate. Clear out the sludge. The page was worse than the banner. No styling. It looked like a form from the 90s. There was a video player that didn't play anything, just a frozen thumbnail of a black screen. In the middle, a single field. Email address. Under that, a checkbox. Yes, I consent. Under that, a button that said, proceed to payment. I don't know why I put my email. I think I wanted to see how far it would go. The button took me to a checkout that accepted every card brand and something with a name I'd never heard of. $299 at the top. And it said, one-time purchase. Allow up to 14 days for completion. 14 days to delete my past. Funny, I could already picture the follow-ups. Due to unexpected complexity, we have encountered a delay. Upgrade to Pro for faster results. It would be stupid. I would laugh. I would cancel it and call my bank and tell them I got scammed by a site that looked like a middle school project. I paid. I got a receipt right away. No company name. Just an amount and a transaction ID. Then another email with a header that looked like it was typed on a typewriter. Your past has been queued. The body had 3 lines. Target. My full name. Scope. Family. Records. Media. Associations. Status. Pending verification. It had a link to manage. I clicked it and got a page that looked the same as the checkout, except this time there was a simple bar, like a progress meter with nothing filled in yet. Next to it, 0% complete. It was so dumb I had to show someone. I took a screenshot and texted my sister Jill. This is what you get when you can't sleep, I wrote. She sent me back a row of laughing emojis. She asked, is this legal? I replied, it's the dark web, of course it's legal. It was the kind of joke we made. She said, don't put your card on that crap. I said, too late, LOL. That night, I didn't think about it again. I fell asleep with a documentary playing on my laptop, the sound turned down to where everyone's voices were just air moving in a tube. I woke up once and checked the progress page. Still 0%. Day 1, nothing happened. Day 2, I got a DM from an old friend I hadn't kept up with since college. He had tagged me in a photo where we were 21 and pretending to look cool by not looking at the camera. He said, remember this? I wrote back, wow. I didn't mention the progress bar. It felt childish. That afternoon, I found the old forum thread where I'd clicked the ad, but the banner was gone. The thread was about something else, and had moved on without me. Day 3. I checked the progress page out of habit. It said 6%. I laughed at the number. I sent a picture of it to Jill. "Congrats," she replied. "Your past is almost gone." I sent the shrug emoji. That evening, my mother called me. She doesn't usually call without texting first. The first thing she said was, "Have you talked to Uncle Ray?" I said no. She said, "He's in the hospital. He'd had a heart attack at the grocery store, right by the bananas. He wasn't old, not for our family. He was the kind of uncle who showed up to help you move without saying he was coming. He was the one who told me to always get a receipt and always keep a copy and always write down the name of who you talked to, not just the department." When I hung up, I checked the progress page again. It said 12%. I told myself those numbers don't mean anything. I told myself the ad was a scam. Someone might have scraped public data and put a random number generator on top of it to keep people engaged while they waited to chargebacks and disputes. I told myself a lot of things. Uncle Ray died that night. My mother called me again the next morning and cried in a way that made me want to book a ticket without thinking. I went to work and told my boss, and he said go. And then he tried to do that thing where he puts a hand on my shoulder, but he pulled it back halfway. I spent the day booking trains and trying to find a black tie that didn't have a stain. By the afternoon, the progress page said 18%. I didn't show it to Jill again. I didn't show it to anyone. Sometimes I think the first mistake was paying. Other times I think the first mistake was telling Jill. If I hadn't written "too late, LOL," would any of this have changed? There's a superstition in our family about red strings on wrists and knocking on wood. We don't exactly believe in it, but we don't not believe in it. I think about that a lot now. The shapes our choices make. The ways they look like nothing until they look like traps. The funeral was in a simple chapel, not the big church, the smaller one in the back with the hard chairs. My uncle looked like a version of himself taken down a few notches, like the volume of his presence had been lowered. After, we gathered at my aunt's house and ate food that tasted like it had been boiled in memory. People told stories. No one said the words like they meant them. At least he didn't suffer. He's in a better place. He lived a good life. We say those to fill the air, not to tell the truth. I checked the progress page once in the bathroom. It said 23%. I told myself it was an ugly coincidence. I told myself to stop looking. Then I told myself I'd look one more time and then stop. I didn't stop. My cousin Dan didn't show up to the gathering. His wife said he'd gone for a drive and was taking it hard. When I woke up the next morning, I had 3 missed calls and a text from Jill. "Call me. It's about Dan." He had swerved off the highway into a drainage ditch. The car had flipped. The sheriff said it looked like he fell asleep. I looked at the progress page as if it owed me something. It said 31%. On the train back home, I stared at people's reflections in the window and tried to match them to their bodies. Some faces looked like lies. Some bodies looked like they'd made their own choices without checking in. I told myself there's no way a website could kill someone. I told myself there's no way a website could know when my uncle's heart would stop or where Dan would close his eyes. I think I said it out loud at one point because the man across from me looked up and then looked down again quickly. like he'd almost made a mistake. I didn't tell anyone about the numbers anymore. I don't know if I knew why. Part of it was that I didn't want to say them and have them become true in the saying. Part of it was I didn't want to be seen as the guy who had clicked something stupid and then blamed it for real life. On day 7, the progress said 42%. A new line had appeared under the bar. Next. Legal. I refreshed the page and it was still there. Legal. I didn't have a court case. I didn't have anything pending. I called the bank, held through 3 levels of menus, and when a person answered, I gave them the transaction ID and asked if there was a way to cancel a payment for a service that sounds like a joke. The woman on the line said, very carefully, that I should contact the merchant. I said there is no merchant. She gave me a case number and told me to wait for a call. The call never came. 2 days later, my father told me a lawyer had contacted him about a will. It wasn't Uncle Ray's will. It was mine. The document had my name on it. It had details I had never written. Things like who would get my books and who would get my passwords. It named an executor I had met one time at a networking event. My father said he hung up because it sounded like a prank. I looked at the progress page. 49% under legal, there was a check mark. Under that, next, comms. Maybe this is the part where you expect me to call the police. I did. I went to the station. I sat on a bench and watched a man argue about a parking violation, and a woman try to explain that her neighbor's music wasn't loud so much as oppressive. When it was my turn, I told the man behind the glass that I had paid for a service to delete my past, and now people I know were dying, and I didn't know if those things were related. He asked me why I had paid. I said I thought it was a joke. He asked me why I thought it wasn't a joke now. I said because of the numbers. He wrote something down and then he asked to see the site. When I showed him the progress bar, he nodded like he was looking at a weather report. He said, "We can file an incident report." He said, "If you receive a credible threat, call 911. He said, "Don't go on those sites." He said, "We can refer this to cyber." I went home and put my phone face down. It buzzed. I didn't look. It buzzed again. It was Jill, but I let it ring because I didn't want to bring the numbers into our conversation. I turned the phone over after the 3rd call. There were texts from an unknown number. The texts contained screenshots. They were my emails from 10 years ago. They were my Facebook messages with an X. They were comments I had posted under a burner account when I thought I was being clever. The unknown number sent a message after the screenshots. "We're cleaning for you. Be patient." I threw up in the sink. Not because of what was in the messages. It wasn't that bad. It was the feeling of someone reaching into the drawer where you keep the messy cables and handling each one with a white-gloved hand. The feeling that all your private clutter had become a schedule for someone else. Comms got a check mark the next day. The bar said 57%. The line under it said, "Next, pets." I laughed, and it came out wrong. It sounded like choking. I called my mother. I said, "Don't take Iris out alone." She asked me what I meant. I said, "Is Dad home?" She said he had gone to the store. I said, "Don't answer the door." She asked, half laughing, if I'd joined a church. I said, "Promise me." She went quiet. Then she said, "What is this exactly?" I told her about the site, but only a little. I said I'd clicked on something I shouldn't have, and I didn't know if it meant anything, and I was being paranoid. I said to keep the doors locked, even in the day. She said we live in a nice neighborhood. I said I didn't care. She said, "Is this about that power company scam?" I said, "No, it's about Iris." She laughed then, the laugh of someone who has seen everything your panic looks like and learned to set it aside. She said, "I'll keep her inside." I didn't sleep that night. Every car door on the street sounded like it was next to my bed. Every pipe in the wall sounded like it was full of steps. I told myself this is what guilt feels like. It's the body trying to climb out of itself. The next morning my father called. His voice was flat. He said Iris was gone. He said the back gate had been open. He said he had been in the kitchen, and my mother had been in the bathroom. And when they noticed the quiet, they called and called. He said they found her in the ravine behind the park. He said she looked peaceful, which is what people say when there are no marks they can see. I sat on the floor and felt the rooms around me grow long and narrow. I remembered the first time I met Iris, when Jill brought her home as a puppy and said she was for Mom and Dad. But we both knew she was for everyone. I remembered Iris's bad breath and the way she would tap her foot on the tile when she wanted to be let out. I remembered the time she got scared during a thunderstorm and hid in a closet, and we had to coax her out with cheese. She was never mine, not exactly, but she was one of the things that stayed in my life while other things changed their names. I checked the page. Pets had a check. The bar said 62%. The line under it said, "Next, siblings." I called Jill. I didn't tell her about the line. I just said, "Can you stay with a friend tonight?" She asked me why. I said I didn't want to say it out loud. She said, "What are you doing?" "You're scaring me." I said, "Please." She said, "If you don't tell me, I'm not doing anything." I told her. Not everything. I didn't say the numbers. I didn't say the labels. I said I'd been messing around online, and I'd given money to something I didn't understand. And now I was receiving messages, and our uncle was gone, and Dan, and Iris, and whether or not it was connected, I needed her to humor me. I said, "Can you just go somewhere with other people? Tonight, tomorrow, until I figure this out?" She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'll go to Claire's." I tried to remember Claire. I pictured a blonde woman from Jill's office, but I might have been overlaying a face from a show. I said, "Text me when you get there." She said, "And then what?" I didn't have a good answer. I said, "I'll call the police again." I did call. They said they had my incident report and a case number, and they'd refer it to the right department. The man on the phone had a measured tone that could have been concern or protocol. I repeated the part about the website. He repeated the part about not visiting it again. He said, "If you receive threats, call 911. I said, "What if the threat is the absence of a thing?" He didn't answer that. I went to Jill's apartment. The place smelled like the plant she always forgets to water. She had left it on the windowsill so it could judge her more proudly. The living room looked like it was rearranged yesterday. There was a new bookshelf. Half the books were stacked on their sides. It looked like someone was in the middle of doing a thing and had gotten distracted. I stood and looked at the empty half glass where she would pour the same amount of wine every night and talk like she was working through a puzzle only she could see. She wasn't there. The bed was made. The closet was open. 2 dresses on hangers on the door. On the counter there was a note that said, "Back soon," with a smiley face and a cat drawing. It wasn't her handwriting. At least it wasn't her handwriting the way I knew it. The round parts were too round. The straight lines were too straight. It looked like a version of her handwriting that had been taught by someone with a ruler. I called her and her phone rang in the apartment. The sound came from under the couch. I got on my knees and reached, and my hand closed on the side of the phone. It was still warm. The screen said one new message from a number with no name. I opened it. It was a picture of the bookshelf, taken at a tilt. In the corner of the photo, Jill's foot was visible, not bearing any weight, angled like a question. I ran down the stairs and out into the street. I called 911 and said the words in the wrong order. The operator slowed me down. I gave the address. I said my sister might have been taken. The operator said, "Who might have taken her?" I said, "The people who are deleting my past." She didn't answer for a second, then said, "Is there anyone else with you?" I said no. She said to wait outside. I stood there and looked at the windows like they would lean down and tell me things. When the patrol car pulled up, I wanted to grab the officer by the shoulders and shake him until he saw the numbers. Instead, I answered his questions. He asked if Jill had any enemies. I said, "No, of course not." He raised his eyebrows a little like, "Of course not," was a thing people say. I showed him the picture and he squinted at the corner. He said it could be a trick of the light. He said it could be photoshopped. I said I didn't think it was. The longer I stood there, the further away my body felt. Like I was standing inside the outline of a person waiting for the person to catch up. They took a report. They walked through the apartment and taped things and photographed things. One of them asked if Jill had any recent disagreements with anyone online. The word "online" sounded weightless in his mouth, like it could float out the window and mean nothing. I told them about the messages. They asked to see the website. I said I didn't think we should go there again. The officer looked at me like I had a secret door in my head I didn't want to open. The progress page said 68%. Siblings got a check. Under it, next, parents. I drove to my parents' house without sleeping. The highway ran out of itself over and over, becoming new lines of road with different numbers of lanes like it couldn't commit to one shape. I called them and they picked up on the second ring and the third. They said they were fine. My mother sounded like she was trying to contain something. My father sounded like he had a list he kept looking at between words. I told them I was coming. I told them to lock everything. I told them to get in the car and go to a hotel and wait in the lobby. They said they would. I turned on the radio and turned it off. I thought about when I was 19 and I'd crashed my bike and walked home with a split lip, thinking if I could get through the door without my mother seeing the cut, it wouldn't count as an injury. I thought about how that never worked. When I arrived, the front door was open. My mother was on the couch with her hands folded like the way you fold instruction manuals when you're done pretending you'll take them out again. My father was in his chair, the one with the grooves his elbows had made over the years. The TV was on, but the sound was muted. A news anchor's mouth kept opening and closing without meaning anything. On the coffee table there was a piece of paper with a list of names. The family, first cousins, second cousins, an old neighbor's name, the dog's name. "Who put this here?" I asked. my mother said without moving her head. It was in the mailbox this morning. My father said, we thought it was a joke. He didn't say, but then, because it was already in the air. I turned the piece of paper over. On the back, there was a single sentence. We have removed the unnecessary attachments. The handwriting was neat and medium-sized, the kind of handwriting that meets the center of the line and doesn't take more space than it needs. I wanted to say something like, "This is insane." I wanted to walk to the kitchen and come back with a knife, as if a knife could solve an absence. I went to the doors and locked them. Then I unlocked them and locked them again, like I was teaching the house a lesson. I went to the windows and checked the latches. I checked under the beds like the threat would respect the ritual. We stayed like that for a day. We ate only when we remembered we hadn't. My mother would say things like, "The violet is doing well," and then stop, realizing there wasn't a second part to the sentence. My father tried to make a plan. He took out a pen and said, Okay. If they come from the front, we go out the back. If they come from the back, we run to the neighbors." He looked at the clock like it had rules. That night there was no knock. There was no window breaking. There was no shadow. There was a silence that laid itself down over the house like a new layer of paint. In the morning, my mother didn't wake up. She looked like she was sleeping. She was curled toward the back of the couch, one hand by her cheek. Her breathing had always been soft. We had teased her for it when I was a kid, saying she could hide behind curtains in horror movies. Now there was nothing to tease. My father touched her shoulder, and then both his hands moved in a startled way, like he was trying to catch a falling plate, even though there was nothing falling. He said her name and then said it again, and then said it again, like if he could just say it enough times he could keep it. The EMTs were kind. That's the word my mind uses, because it's the word we use for people who have to see the worst parts of our little lives. They said it was likely her heart. They said it didn't look like there was a struggle. They said a doctor would say more later. My father turned to me and said, "This is your fault," and then immediately said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." And then he cried in a way I had never seen. It looked like he had been saving up, and now the bank was open. I checked the page. 76% parents had one check, only one. Under it, next, parents. I wanted to smash the phone. I wanted to throw it into the sink and turn on the disposal and listen to it become smaller. I didn't. My father didn't see me look. He was on the phone with Jill's friend, the one who had been expecting her and never saw her. He said words like police and report and case number, and they sounded like different species of the same animal. I stayed with my father another night. I slept in my old room, which he had turned into a kind of museum of not deciding. There were boxes labeled "Maybe Keep." There were old posters rolled up like snakes. On the desk, there was a stack of photos wrapped with a rubber band that had dried out and stuck to the top photo like a second sky. I picked up the stack and looked at one picture of a picnic from years ago. We all looked sweaty and pleased with ourselves. Iris was in the corner, her nose buried in a paper plate. Jill's hair was in a messy bun she had called her engineering solution when we were kids. I put the photos down like they might break if I held them longer. I dreamed stupid dreams where the website was a person with a name tag, and I kept trying to get their attention while they filed copies of my life in a cabinet labeled pending. When I woke up, the house sounded wrong. It sounded arranged. I walked to the hallway and saw on the floor another paper, the same square of white, the same neat handwriting. It said, "We are approaching completion." I ran to the living room. My father's chair was empty. The front door was open. It took everything in me not to run outside. My body wanted to fling itself into the street and scream. I made myself stop. I made myself look. On the floor by the door there was his hat. He never went anywhere without it. On the table by the hat, there was his wallet. He never took it off until he was in for the night. I called his name and then stopped. Not because I thought someone was listening, but because I didn't want to hear how the name sounded in an empty house. I went to the kitchen and checked the back door. It was locked. I went to the bathroom and checked the window. It was closed. It occurred to me that open and closed were going to stop meaning what they meant. I called the police again. They came. They wrote. They asked. They looked at me like I had become a symbol. They asked me to come to the station. They said there were more questions, and that waiting in the house wouldn't be healthy. The word healthy in that context made me feel like I might laugh again, and I didn't trust what the laugh would sound like. At the station, a different officer took me into a room where the table was too big and the chairs were too small. He said words in a careful order. "We're taking this seriously. We're going to coordinate with neighboring jurisdictions. Do you have any enemies? Do you belong to any groups? Have you traveled outside the country recently?" Each question sounded like a key trying every door. None of them fit. I told him about the website. He said they would try to find it. I said they wouldn't. He didn't argue. He asked me to forward the emails and messages. I did. He asked me to stop going to the site. I said I would. Then I didn't. In the bathroom, I opened the page. 84% parents had a second check. Under it, next, extended. I thought about all the people I only saw at weddings and funerals. I thought about the people my mother had told me to be sweet to when I was a kid because they had been to things when I was a baby. I thought about the branches of the tree we've printed and taped to a wall at 3 different reunions. I thought about how a tree looks when it's drawn without ground. I tried to call my aunt, my father's sister. The number went straight to voicemail. I tried to call my mother's cousin, the one who came over at Thanksgiving and told the same 3 stories and laughed each time like it was new. No answer. I found myself scrolling through names and pressing call like I was reading a poem in another language and hoping it would sound right spoken out loud. The progress line updated while I was looking at it. The bar reset to 90%. Under it, next, education. Someone sent me a photo of my high school from a number I didn't know. The message said, "We are very thorough." I walked out of the station without signing whatever they wanted me to sign. I wanted to be outside, where the sky at least pretended there was a bigger thing than my little bar. I got in my car and drove to the school. The building looked the same and smaller, the way all buildings do when you return to them. I parked across the street like I used to when I skipped last period. I wanted to see if anyone there felt the thing I felt. Students walked in and out with their shoulders arranged around their phones. A teacher I recognized by the way he held his briefcase waddled toward the side entrance. A custodian smoked a cigarette like it was a meeting he had to attend. No one looked at me. No one looked at anything. If there was a person waiting in a car, sending these pictures and marking these boxes, they were just another sitting human to the people around them. I tried to pick out who it could be. The mother in the SUV with a sticker family on the back window. The guy in an old sedan staring through me. The kid on the curb with a backpack and a stare like he was practicing. The more I looked, the more possible suspects I had until everyone had become a possibility, and therefore none of them were. I went home. The apartment smelled like itself again, which I hated. I opened the page. 94% education, had a check. Under it, next, work. I emailed my boss. I told him I was taking time. He called me and said to take all I needed. He asked if there was anything he could do. I said, please tell HR not to give my address to anyone. He didn't ask why. He said okay in a voice like he was moving through marsh. 2 hours later, I got an email from HR saying they had received a request for my employment verification, and they had declined it because of my note. Attached was a PDF of the email they had received. It looked like a generic background check, but the requester field was empty, like a field on a form the code had forgotten to enforce. The email said, "We are auditing this identity." I refreshed the page. Work had a check. 96% under it. Next, social. My phone stopped receiving calls. Then it stopped making them. My internet went down. The website still loaded, which I can't explain. I don't think the site was obeying the same rules as the rest of my day. I looked around the apartment like waiting would make it decide not to choose me. I thought about leaving, then didn't. The truth is, I didn't know where to go. Somewhere else wasn't a place. I opened the contacts on my phone and scrolled through names I had put stars next to and never called. I thought about calling an ex and asking if she remembered the color of the first apartment's carpet. I thought about messaging a guy from school and asking if he still had the skateboard we broke together. I didn't call anyone. I could hear a voice like a librarian in my head saying, "Please be quiet. We're doing something important." When the bar hit 98%, the site changed. The black background turned gray. The white text stayed. A message appeared. Finalization in progress. Please refrain from creating new attachments. I stood up and walked to the window. The day had gone without me. That's what it felt like. People were at dinner and tired and full of their routine. I thought about the word attachment. I thought about the forms you fill out at clinics where they ask about your attachments like they are allergies. I thought about what they meant by new. I touched the glass and saw my fingerprint and wiped it away quickly. And then I laughed at myself because of course that isn't what they meant. The bar stopped at 99%. It waited there for a long time. The little percent sign blinked. I wondered if it was waiting for me to do something. I didn't move. I felt like I was being watched. I told myself there is no being watched. There is just me, making up a watcher, because making up an enemy feels more productive than admitting there is none. At midnight, my doorbell rang. I didn't go to the door. I sat on the floor as if sitting was a defense. The bell rang again. It didn't sound urgent. It sounded like someone reminding me that the door existed. After the third ring, no, not around that number. Just after enough rings that the sound became part of the room, it stopped. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Package at door. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to leave it closed. Both options were wrong, and choosing between two wrong options is most of adult life. I stood up, put my hand on the bolt, and stared through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The light had burned out 2 days ago, and building management had been saying someone would fix it. The darkness turned the peephole's distortion into a smear. I opened the door with the chain on. A small box sat on the welcome mat I had bought as a joke that said, "Welcome is conditional." I brought the box inside. It was heavier than it looked. There was no label, no tape, just a lid. I didn't want to lift it. I also wanted to. I took a breath like I was about to go underwater and lifted the lid. Inside was a single object, a flash drive. I closed the lid. I put the box on the table. I stared at it. The site on my phone refreshed by itself. The bar said 99%. Under it, next, self. I didn't plug the drive in. I didn't throw it out. I put it in the drawer with the cables I never organize, and then I closed the drawer like that act could reclassify it as harmless. The site didn't change. It waited. The room waited with it. I want to make something clear because it matters to me. I didn't want any of this. I didn't invite it. I thought I was buying a dumb automated service that would scrub old accounts and remove my name from data brokers. Maybe send a batch of opt-out emails. I thought I was buying a shortcut. You can judge me for that. People buy shortcuts all the time. Diet pills, miracle mops, 30-day certificates that promise you a new career if you watch enough videos. I thought I was buying a thing that would do busy work for me. Instead, this. I slept a little. I dreamed of being a child. Not any specific memory, just the feeling of it. The anger you get when someone ties your shoe too tight, and the way the sun through a curtain turns the dust into a secret you think is only for you. I woke up sore from sleeping on the floor. My phone battery had drained. The website was still open. The bar was still at 99%. It had stopped blinking. The room felt thinner, like the walls were paper, and if I pushed hard enough, my hand would be on the other side. And I'm not sure what I thought was on the other side, except that it wouldn't be better, only different. I got up. I showered. I put on clean clothes. The acts of regular life felt obscene. I made coffee and then poured it down the sink, because the smell made me want to cry. I tried to read a page in a book. I read the same paragraph until the words were just shapes. At noon, there was a knock. Not the doorbell. An actual knock. The kind of knock used by teachers and delivery men. I stood still until the knock came again. I looked through the peephole. A man in a gray hoodie, head down, hands in front like he was fiddling with a phone. I opened the door with the chain and said, "Yes?" He didn't look up. He said, "Package." I said, "You already left it." He said, "This is a different one." He held up an envelope. No markings. I stared. He moved his hand closer, toward the chain. Without thinking, I slid the chain and opened the door a crack. He pushed it with a gentle pressure that felt polite and forced at the same time. He handed me the envelope. His hands were clean. They looked like a person who does one thing well and has nothing to show for it on his skin. "Sign?" he asked. He held out a small screen with a line on it. I scribbled, not my name, just a line. He didn't look. He turned and walked away, not fast, not slow. I closed the door. I opened the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper with the same neat handwriting. "This is not a punishment. This is the service you purchased." I sat down. I felt like I had to apologize to no one. I pulled the flash drive out of the drawer and held it. It was the old kind, fat, with a hole on one end where you could put a string through it. I considered smashing it with a hammer. I considered microwaving it. I considered throwing it off a bridge. I plugged it into my laptop. There was one file, a video. Its name was a long string of numbers and letters like a password. I didn't have to double-click. It opened itself. The screen went black, then gray, then an image. My family's faces. Not an album. A grid. All the photos I had uploaded to any service, any time I had tagged them, any shot they had texted me with emojis in the caption. The grid scrolled slowly. Then the images started disappearing, one by one, not fading, popping. As each one vanished, the video cut to a different clip. 15 seconds, 20 seconds, grainy footage of a person walking into a building, a car pulling out of a driveway, a dog sleeping, and then not. Each clip was time-stamped in a way I guess I can't talk about now, without sounding like the exact kind of person I didn't want to sound like. But the point is, the cuts came. Their order made a new shape. When it was done, the screen went back to the grid, now empty. The video ended. The drive ejected itself. The site on my phone refreshed. The bar rolled over and filled. 100%. There was a chime that I thought had come from the website, but then realized was my building's elevator, which somehow made it worse. The final screen said, "Pass deleted. Thank you for your business." Under it, smaller, "Want to protect your present? Upgrade." There was a button. I didn't click it. I stared at the word upgrade until it stopped meaning anything. It turned into a sound piece. Up. Grade. Grade up. Set a grade. Make something flat. I closed the page. I powered the phone off and off again as if I could reboot the day. I sat at the table and tried to write down the names of the people I had left. The list was shorter than any list I've ever made. I wrote my name and then I drew a line because the habit of making lists is to make them look like they'll need more space. I thought about trying to find someone to blame besides myself. I thought about the man in the hoodie. I thought about the people at the station. I thought about the forum. I thought about the ad. I thought about the mouth of the ad. The way it said, "Delete your past," to 1,000 of us every day. I thought about the fact that we all click things, and sometimes a click is just a click, and sometimes it's a door, and you don't get to know which until after. The apartment felt like a hotel room. Everything temporary, nothing for you. I wanted to call Jill. Not to fix it, just to let her voice do the thing it does, where it makes the air ordinary. I wanted to call my mother and have her tell me I was being dramatic. I wanted to hear my father say my name the way he says it when he wants me to get a wrench from the garage. I wanted to take Iris out in the rain and have her shake off the wet and look at me like I'd done something special by being there. Instead, it's just me, which is what I paid for, I guess. There's a quiet now. It's not peace. It's not a break. It's the quiet of a room that hasn't been lived in yet. I think about the site more than I want to. Not the page itself, I've stopped opening it, but the way it sat in my hand like it had weight. The way it told me what would happen and then made it happen and then told me again not to add anything new. Attachments. The truth is, I have to speak to someone. I have to put words somewhere. Not because I think it'll undo anything. Not because I think I'm warning you. I'm not that noble. I just can't carry this alone in a way that feels like it fits in my chest. So I'm putting it here, on paper. or whatever this is now. Screens and files, a new attachment, a fresh weight. If you're looking for a moral, I don't have one. If you're looking for a procedure, cancel card, change passwords, call this number, I don't have that either. People will say I'm making connections that aren't there, that a heart attack is a heart attack, that cars flip, that dogs get out of gates, that people disappear every day, and no one needs a website to make it happen. Maybe that's true. Maybe I'm the one who wrote the story, and the story wrote me back. When I close my eyes, what I see isn't the grid. It isn't the numbers. It's my mother's handwriting on a recipe card for a dish that none of us liked. It's Jill's stupid cat drawing on a post-it. It's my father's hat on the table by the door. It's Iris's paw print that my mother kept from the vet when she was a puppy. The ink a little smudged because she moved at the last second, because she wanted to be a part of whatever was going on. I keep thinking, I could move. I could change my name. I could get rid of everything and become a person with a backpack and a rented room and a job that pays in cash. The site's parting line keeps running in my head, not like a threat, just like a sign on a highway. Want to protect your present? Upgrade. What happens if you do? Who counts as your present? Does it mean the bar starts again but with new labels? Neighbors, employers, people who smile at you in shops, yourself, sliced into new pieces. I find myself wanting to ask, write me a quote, tell me the plan, just so I can say no in a way that feels like saying yes to something else. I'm not clicking anything. I'm not signing any form. I am not entering my email again. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of a second choice they can pretend is consent. The site will sit there, because that's what sites do. They keep sitting. They keep waiting. They don't get tired. They don't need sleep. That's one advantage they have. That, and the fact that we put things in them, and then wonder why they know things. If you've read this far, I guess that means I've made an attachment. I guess that means I didn't follow the final instruction. Refrain from creating new attachments. It felt like an order I wanted to break. Maybe that's the final joke here. The only rebellion left is to put a thread back where someone pulled all the others away. There's a knock again. I don't go to the door. I sit in the old chair I bought because it was cheap, and I listen to the sound. It's a practical knock. The kind of knock you'd use if you didn't want to startle someone. I wait. I think of my father saying, "You don't have to open just because someone knocked." I think of my mother saying, "If it's important, they'll come back." I think of Jill texting me a string of emojis because she couldn't find the words, and then finding them anyway after a moment. I think of Iris lying with her chin on her paws, watching a spot on the wall like it might become a thing if she waited long enough. The knock comes again, and then it stops. The building breathes. Somewhere, a neighbor plays a video too loud, and the bass hits the wall like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to me. I pick up a pen. I write my name again. I say it out loud. I try to make it mean something in the empty room. The site is gone from my phone. The flash drive is in the drawer. The progress bar is inside me now, and I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. It sits there like a ruler laid flat in a pencil case, quiet and ready for another line if I let it. I don't know what happens to someone whose past gets deleted and then refuses the upgrade. I don't know if there's a name for the blank that comes after. I don't know if tomorrow there will be anything besides the chair and the walls and the street outside and the sound of a package arriving for someone else down the hall. For now, this is what I have. A room and a list of names that doesn't spill onto the next line. It's thin. It's not enough. It's what's left. I paid to delete my past. They did their job. They gave me a clean slate and rubbed out every hand that had ever written on it. I'm writing this in the space they left, just to prove the slate holds ink.